Hello, welcome back. Part 2 of 4. A virtual Inset Day with David Wells. So in this second part, I want to think, if you don't mind, just briefly about thinking. A monk, Thomas Merton, taught about 50 years ago that if the Western culture doesn't learn how to contemplate, it will in the end perish. What does it mean to contemplate? Sometimes things that are quite easy to do are quite hard to teach. The church gives us two languages of prayer. The first is an inherited language, crafted words given to us, some taught by Jesus himself, the Lord's Prayer, for example. The second language is to contemplate. It's almost to stop doing all the thinking and to just to be. And I'm going to suggest in part 2, that's this part, that what's just happened in the last 5 months, really, has led people to a certain contemplation, even if they didn't know it. And I'm going to give you 7 examples of this. And all I want you to do, if you don't mind, is test them. I mean, are they real or not? 7 of them, just 7. Number 1, clapping the NHS. What just happened there? Well, what began to happen was during lockdown, we had a heightened sense of gratitude. It started with the NHS, but before long, you could see it in people. There was a heightened awareness that only comes when we stop to say thank you. For those of you who are Catholic, you might know this, but the priest during Mass, very powerful, in a prayer to the Father says, "It is our duty and our salvation, always and everywhere, to give you thanks." To be grateful is a central pillar of what it means to be a Christian. And here's the thing, it's actually good for us. During the pandemic, it seemed as if we were more prepared, I hope, to be grateful. I mean, we're not noble or any different to anyone else, but we put on the gate of our house a big sign that just said thank you to the bin men. And I remember thinking, actually, I'm 57. I've never thanked refuse collectors in all my life. But we had a big sign that we painted just to say thank you during this time for coming out to collect our waste. We weren't unusual, but point number 1 was a heightened sense of gratitude. Point number 2, birdsong. People started to hear birdsong. If you are lucky or were lucky enough to live with a garden or near a park, you will know that people reconnected, at least to some extent, with the beauty of the natural world. I think it was Lucy Jones who suggested that we lose connection with nature at our peril. And I noticed, I don't know whether you did, but part of our contemplation comes from being in tune with nature. It's why so many of us, when we don't know what to do, go for a walk. Point number 3, what you might call a new globalization, or perhaps a widening circle of concern. I was listening to a talk by Reed Hastings, who is the founder of Netflix, and one of the things he said struck a chord with me. He said, we are discovering that what happens to some of us affects all of us. If you like, we became more aware of our plight and the plight of others, but not just in our immediate circles, around the world. None of us, he said, can hide from the fate of all of us. Point number 4. We rethought who our heroes are. I mean, did you notice? Before COVID-19, our heroes were mainly sportsmen and women and celebrities. Good people, no problem with that, paid huge amounts of money. But during this time, the last became first. Did you notice that some of our most least paid workers became our heroes? Care workers, nurses, and people who we often don't even see became the heroes of our day. Point number 5. Many people took an opportunity to learn new things, whether it was how to do a quiz on Zoom or to knit, but people became creative. There was a striving to not waste time, but to use time well. And many things were taught and learned. St. John Henry Newman, said to live is to change, and to live fully is to change often. And many people saw an opportunity to think about new things. Point number 6 I've called seeing our neighbours. Well, what do I mean like this? Jesus is asked, who is my neighbour? And often we've looked at the parable of the Good Samaritan, for example, as an opportunity to help the most vulnerable. But supposing there's another answer to that question, that our neighbour turned out to be our neighbour. I mean, the one over the fence. I noticed that people were not just saying, morning, morning, anymore. Did you notice that? That somehow people began to learn names and even say, how are you? Lovely couple next door. But I've never had reason to go round and just check that they're okay. And that gave them an opportunity to tell us how much they'd enjoyed watching our children grow up over the fence. And I found myself asking myself, why didn't we have this conversation a long time ago? Contemplation invariably leads to connection. Which leads me to point number 7. A certain reordering. Sometimes Catholics hear that as reordering furniture. But I think for some of us it became a rethinking of what comes first, of our hierarchy of truths, of the things most important to us. That somehow, in all of that, we became more human. Perhaps with all those 7 points together, I might put it like this. Do you remember Dawn Bilborough? Well, you do, but you might have forgot her name. Right at the beginning of all this, she stares into the camera on her phone and pleads with us to stop buying all the fruit and vegetables because she's a nurse and when we need her, she'll be there. It was a very powerful statement, and it led me to wonder, when people say, I hope we don't go back to how it was, do you think it was that they were contemplating a better way of being? So my question at the end of this section is quite a simple question really, and it goes like this. Do you want it to go back to how it was? Or have you discovered a deeper truth, a happier state, something more reasoned and seasoned, something more valuable? If it happens again, will you be at the shops buying up all the toilet rolls? Or have we learnt something good? So, question number 2. Do you want it to go back to how it was? Or is this an opportunity for a new start? See you in a minute. Bye!